My family hijacked my vacation plans for my golden sister and her kids. But this time, I had a secret escape plan of my own. Reddit, I need your thoughts on this. I need help with my family situation, which has been collecting for decades, but it is a long one. Despite growing up in a relatively normal suburban Massachusetts home, I, 35 female, have always struggled with this situation. My older sister Kate, 42 female, has always been the golden child. Since I can remember, our house has served as a shrine to Kate's life, with every wall filled with her accomplishments and every conversation centered on her. My parents were too busy preparing for Kate's college interviews to buy me a cake for my 10th birthday, which I remember vividly. They even tried to pass off Kate's leftover graduation cake, which still bears her name, as my birthday cake. Kate's achievements overshadowed every major event in my life as I grew older. Kate had recently joined the debate team, so my parents were unaware that I had made the honor roll in middle school. Kate had a college campus visit scheduled, so they were unable to attend the ceremony when I won a local high school painting competition. Knowing that sharing my triumphs would only result in a fleeting, "That's nice, dear," before the subject of Kate was brought up again, I learned to celebrate them alone, in my room. Even our things revealed our family's priorities. Kate's room was always outfitted with cutting-edge technology, fashionable attire, and everything she required for her numerous extracurricular activities. My room, on the other hand, was overflowing with used clothing. When I indicated an interest in taking music lessons, I had to make do with Kate's discarded violin, old clothes, and school materials. I had difficulty playing the violin since it was too large for me. "We already spent so much on Kate's piano lessons this year," my mother said in response to my plea for a more appropriate size. Throughout high school, the trend was maintained. Kate received individual instruction for her SATs, so I had to study with borrowed library books. My parents took out a loan to help her buy a car for college. They encouraged me to take the bus if I needed help getting about. Kate's wants and desires were central to all financial decisions, family discussions, and Christmas preparations. It was quite challenging in college. Kate graduated from a prestigious university with our parents' full support. When it came time for me to attend a public school, they could only agree to pay half of the tuition. They clarified, "We're still paying off Kate's student loans. You'll need to figure out the rest on your own." To make ends meet, I worked 2 part-time jobs while a student, usually dozing off over my textbooks. Kate, in the meantime, was starting her career in a position that our parents had helped her get through their contacts. Kate got married 7 years ago, and everything changed, or rather, worsened. For a year, our entire family focused solely on the wedding. My parents took out another loan to pay for her dream wedding, which featured a beautiful gown, an expensive location, and over 300 guests. Despite their reservations about the payments, I recall hearing them in the kitchen one evening, insisting that nothing was too good for Kate's special day. Was there any doubt that she was her maid of honor? I was expected to organize bridal showers, plan a luxurious bachelorette party, and handle any small issues that arose. When I expressed my stress about handling these commitments while working a full-time job, my mother urged me, "Don't be selfish, Elizabeth. This is your sister's special time." The twins followed. Kate's parents were overjoyed when she announced she was having twins. Even though they were still repaying their wedding loan, they contributed to the down payment on a nearby home. On the day they signed those contracts, I saw them spend their retirement funds, which they said they couldn't access when I needed help with college. They argued that this was different. "This is for our grandchildren." So, who was the default babysitter? Yes, I do. It began as occasional babysitting. The request, "Elizabeth, could you watch the boys for a few hours?" became a weekly practice, then expanded to evenings when they had appointments. My parents supported this arrangement, saying, "This is what family does." Kate and her husband Jack, 43 male, felt that I would always be there to help them if I tried to object. Even while I adore them, the twins, who are now energetic 7-year-olds, are exhausting. Every weekend, Kate drops them off unexpectedly at my house, generally under the guise that she needs me time, or has important errands to run. The lads run wild, turning my modest apartment into a disaster. Kate begins crying about how overwhelmed she is when I try to establish limits or request ahead notice, and my parents criticize me for not being supportive. I worked a lot of overtime to establish myself in the marketing sector. I just received a promotion offer that involved longer hours and more travel. My mother said, "But what about the twins? Your sister needs you here." Kate added, "You can't take that job, Elizabeth. Who will help me with the boys?" When I brought up the subject during a family dinner in the hopes of earning some compliments, it appears that my time, profession, and life are entirely irrelevant. My father adds, Family should come first, Elizabeth. My mother constantly says, your sister has 2 children to look after. You don't know what tired really means. When I tried to explain how overwhelming it all is, Kate accused me of being envious of her life and her children. She said, you're just bitter because you're still single, as if my marital status was the primary element determining my worth as a person. Following a particularly stressful weekend with the twins, I decided to finally indulge myself to a beach trip last month. They successfully ruined my laptop and left permanent marks on my couch. I knew I needed a getaway. I discovered a modest, unpretentious resort in Florida that was excellent for a relaxing getaway. My mother's eyes shone as I mentioned it at our weekly family dinner. Oh, that's perfect, we should all go together. The twins would love the beach. Kate had started organizing events before I could protest. She said, you can take the boys swimming while Jack and I have some alone time, as if my trip would automatically convert into a time for them to be cared for. Of course, in exchange for my aid with the twins, my parents offered to upgrade my reservation to a higher-end resort where they could all stay. Totally disregarding the fact that this was supposed to be my vacation, they began planning activities and vacations based on what the twins wanted. I made a decision that changed everything as I was lying in bed that night. I booked a separate resort on a quiet tiny island. I kept the change of plans a secret from everyone. I quietly began preparing by arranging time off work, packed my belongings, and ensuring that my emergency fund was available. Even though I knew it was dishonest, I couldn't take it any longer. At the airport, they will be removed from us. While I board my flight to another city, they will be flying to Florida. I have disabled location sharing and am prepared for the inevitable criticism. Yes, I understand that there will be drama. Yes, I understand that they will be upset. However, I want to prioritize myself for the first time in my life. For 35 years, I have been the dependable sister, the ideal daughter, and the always available aunt. To meet my family's expectations, I sacrificed my social life, weekends, and personal needs. I was frequently babysitting, so I missed out on dating opportunities. I have denied opportunities that may conflict with the demands of my family. To be available to them whenever they need me, I have placed my personal life on wait. Right now, I'm fleeing a lifetime of exploitation, not just a trip. I aim to use this as a turning point to establish clear boundaries with my family, and possibly even take a complete break from them. I'm tired of always making sacrifices, being the family's pillar of support, and being the reliable backup plan. Reddit, what should I do? Am I exaggerating? Is it acceptable for me to want something more for myself, or should I simply follow their lead and accept my place in the family? Update 1. I sincerely appreciate all of your assistance and guidance. A lot has happened since my last post, and I'd like to describe how everything turned out. Although everything went as planned, the day at the airport was more emotionally charged than I had expected. I purposely chose a check-in station that was far from my family's location when I arrived early. I saw everyone pass through the terminal's glass walls. Jack checking their reservation details, my parents looking excited, Kate handling the twins, and Kate dragging luggage. As soon as they began to make their way to the check-in counter, I quietly passed through security for my own flight. When they discovered I wasn't at their gate, my phone started buzzing. The perplexed text first appeared. Where are you? Our current location is gate B12. The concerned ones ask, how are you, Elizabeth? Has anything happened? Finally, the indignant ones. How could you treat us like this? The boys are in tears. Before boarding my flight, I turned off my phone. For the first time in years, I felt an unusual combination of liberation and guilt. I had carried that guilt for the most of my life. However, what about freedom? It was exciting, and it was new. The bustling tourist spot they were headed to was nothing like the small island where my resort was located. Years of strain gone the moment I stepped onto the beach. There are no twins to babysit, no family issues to deal with, and no schedule to follow. The ocean, me, and absolute freedom. In fact, the first 2 days were hard. The twins would be having lunch now, and Kate would usually need help getting to bed at this hour, so I kept checking the time. It's difficult to overcome decades of indoctrination. However, something happened on the 3rd day. I tried things I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. I enjoyed every minute of my ridiculous, yet entertaining surfing lesson. When I registered in a yoga class by the beach, I met a group of other lone travelers. I even went on an unplanned dinner date with a wonderful man I met in the resort's coffee shop one evening. Even though it was a simple dinner, it served as a reminder that I might live a life apart from my family. The actual test came when I finally turned on my phone after 5 days. There were dozens of voicemails, 300 plus text messages, and 147 missed calls. My mother had even called my place of employment to declare a family emergency. Fortunately, I had previously informed my supervisor that I would be taking a vacation. Some voicemails were played for me. My mother's tone shifted from concerned to angry to manipulative. "Elizabeth, how could you abandon your family in such a way? The twins are inconsolable. Did we raise you like this?" Even worse were Kate's messages. "You've ruined everything. The lads are diligent in their pursuit for Aunt Lizzie. I can't manage meetings on my own, so Jack had to reduce them." However, one communication struck a different tone. My father mailed it, although he seems unsure for once. "Elizabeth, please let us know you're safe even though I don't understand what's happening." I'd never heard him speak to me without immediately defending Kate or urging me to do more before. I messaged our family group chat only once. "I'm having a lovely trip and am safe. When I return, I'll contact you. Please give me room." I then ended the discussion and continued chatting to myself. In addition to reading bedtime stories to the twins, I also read 3 novels, spoke with other guests without interruption, and watched the sunset every evening instead of racing home to help with showers and sleep. These 5 days changed my life. I began journaling to process years of suppressed emotions. I ate dinner at a small beachside restaurant last night, and when the elderly waitress noticed I was alone, she asked if I was okay with my solitude. She said something that stuck with me after I explained my situation briefly. "Family is important, honey, but not at the price of your own well-being. Putting yourself first is sometimes the most daring thing you can do." When I returned home, I didn't immediately go to my place. Instead, I booked a hotel room for 2 nights to give myself time to prepare for the inevitable encounter. During this time, I updated my work emergency contacts, changed the locks on my doors, and, most importantly, put my boundaries in writing. I unintentionally liked a coworker's post on social media, which is how my family found out I was back. My mother and Kate arrived to my apartment building within hours, continually banging my intercom. Across the street, I watched them from the window of my hotel room, strangely disconnected from their brilliant performance. "I'm going to address them tomorrow, at a neutral coffee shop, not at my house, and I know it won't be easy, but I've prepared what I'm going to say." My hands quiver just thinking about it. But for the first time in my life, I'm choosing myself, and I know I'm doing the right thing despite the anxiety, guilt, and drama that will inevitably follow. I'll offer another update after speaking with my family, and I'm grateful that Reddit provided me the confidence to take this first step toward independence. Update 2. As planned, my family and I arrived at the coffee shop, and the situation became even more heated than I had anticipated. The visit at the coffee shop began sweetly enough. I arrived early and sat at a corner table where I could see the front door and the emergency exit, a habit I'd developed over years of anticipating family drama. My hands were shaking so terribly that I couldn't even grasp my coffee cup. My parents, Kate, and, surprisingly, Jack all showed up together, and I am relieved there are no twins. I lifted my hand and said what I had practiced before they began their scheduled speeches. "I'm establishing boundaries, and they can't be negotiated." The next 2 hours were a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Kate started crying as she detailed how my absence had traumatized the twins, and my mother tried to inculcate guilt. "Following everything we have done for you." Unexpectedly, Jack attempted to mediate by proposing a solution in which I would only see the kids every other weekend. For the most part, my father sat quietly and anxious. Kate's statement, "You are being selfish. Family means sacrifice," was the defining moment. Something broke within me, and I said clearly but calmly, "Yes, family requires sacrifice, but it should be reciprocated. When was the last time you made any sacrifices for me?" The ensuing silence was deafening. I revealed everything for the first time. The years of being Kate's second best friend, the unfair financial treatment, and the persistent belief that my life and time were less valuable than theirs. I then showed them my calendar for the previous year, with every weekend reserved for babysitting and every holiday tailored to their needs. My mother attempted to intervene, saying, "But that's what aunts do." I answered by saying something I had never dared to utter before. "No, that is what paid babysitters do. And Kate, if you require this much assistance, perhaps it's time to consider employing one." My mother followed Kate as she raced out, and Jack lingered, apologizing profusely for taking advantage of my availability. After a long silence, my father added, "We never meant to make you feel this way." It was something, but not an apology. When they left, I followed through on my plan. I moved to a different part of town and got a new apartment, which is smaller than my previous one but in a secure building with a doorman who is aware of my situation. My new phone number is now only known to my workplace and a few close friends. Rebuilding my life from scratch was the most challenging component, not the moving or the planning. I had no meaningful hobbies and few close friends because I had spent years caring for my family. I began quietly, enrolling in pottery classes, joining a local reading club, and accepting dinner invitations from coworkers that I had previously rebuffed. It was a strange first weekend of true freedom. I did things I had never done before, such as staying up late, visiting a farmer's market, and spending hours browsing a bookstore. Kate did not send me an urgent text, Mom does not make guilt-tripping calls, and there are no requests for last-minute childcare. My family's reaction to my relocation was harsh but expected. When my mother tried to contact me through the company switchboard, they discovered that my new job does not allow personal calls during business hours. Kate even came to my office once, but security was alerted beforehand, and she wrote a tearful letter accusing me of destroying our family. Kate first protested to Jack taking the twins to weekend events, but she has subsequently accepted the little but significant change. He apologized by email for his role in making the situation possible. My parents are having a difficult time adjusting. Dad periodically texts, typically in an embarrassing attempt to strike up a conversation, and Mom alternates between violent outbursts and frigid silence. She left a voicemail last week expressing, "When you're done with this rebellion, we'll welcome you back." This is not a phase, and she doesn't understand it. This is my new reality. My boss appointed me to handle a large new project after noting the difference in my productivity and attention due to the absence of frequent family disruptions at work. For the first time in years, I'm casually dating, but I'm taking things slowly. Internally, there has been the largest shift. I no longer have the continual background anxiety that I had for years, and I've been exercising more frequently, improving my nutrition, and sleeping better. According to my therapist, yes, I have finally started therapy. I am beginning to recover from what she calls chronic familial stress syndrome. Last weekend, the twins sent me a gift that included handcrafted notes expressing how much they miss me. Even though it was bittersweet, I remained resolute. I carefully wrote them back to let them know that, while I love them, I need some time to look after myself. I had to write it even though Kate is unlikely to read it to them. "You seem lighter now. You look years younger," said an old acquaintance when I saw her yesterday. She is right. Despite the angry texts, emotional manipulation attempts, and residual guilt, I feel lighter and more emancipated. Respect for personal space, acceptance of one's own needs, and reciprocal assistance, rather than merely one-sided sacrifice, are all components of true love. I'm discovering that family love shouldn't seem like a prison sentence. My new flat will be 1 month old next week, and this is the first time I've ever dared to host a little housewarming celebration, with only a few friends from pottery class, book club, and work. There are no expectations, drama, or family, just people who accept me for who I am. I'll post another update soon, and I'm grateful to Reddit for providing me the confidence to make a life change. Update 3. Completed update. It's been a life-changing 3 months, and I'd like to share how it all came together. The confrontation I had been dreading and anticipating arrived last week when my father unexpectedly came up to my place of employment. His method was distinct from Kate's emotional manipulations or my mother's previous frenzied attempts. When he asked if we could have lunch together, he was composed and even resigned. We met at a tranquil restaurant near my employment, and for the first time in my life, he recognized me as his daughter, not Kate's sister or the family's backup plan. He said, "You look healthy," in a shocked tone. Happier. The fact that he hadn't seen my dissatisfaction in years weighed hard on the observation that remained between us. The family had offered him a proposal, and they were willing to make sacrifices. If I agreed to reclaim my role in the family, I could have every other weekend off. He went on to remark, they'd even pay for my time with the twins, as if earning money from the commitment would make it more appealing. As I looked across the table at him, I knew they still didn't get it. They saw my freedom as a bargaining tool rather than a basic right. "Dad," I answered, "I am not bargaining for my independence. I am living it." The talk that followed was the most frank I've ever had with my father. I detailed how their relentless focus on Kate had damaged me emotionally as well as practically, and I told him about things he had forgotten or never noticed: dreams, accomplishments, and birthdays. His answer was unusual. He sat for a long time in silence, not providing the usual defense of their judgments. Finally, he stated, "We believed we were doing what was best for our family. We never realized how much we were hurting you." Although it wasn't an apology, it was the first time I'd been acknowledged. When he inquired about my new life, that was the genuine turning point. He listened for the first time as I explained my pottery lessons, my job advancement, and the new acquaintances I had made. Despite its flaws, I showed him images of a vase I had produced. I was stunned by what he said next. "You seem to have built a good life for yourself without us." The realization and anguish in his voice were genuine. We agreed at the end of lunch that nothing would ever be the same again. He gave me my first genuine embrace in years as he said to me to leave. I hope someday we can be part of your life again, but on different terms. That exchange appeared to spark a final bout of family turmoil. Kate has been making passive-aggressive remarks about selfish sisters and broken families on social media because she feels deceived by our father's approval of my decisions. After learning about our lunch, my mother launched a new round of emotional attacks, informing family members that I require an intervention because I am having a breakdown. Their actions, in my opinion, are an attempt to keep control over someone who has finally earned their freedom. The difference is that none of it has the same influence on me as it had before, and my new life has given me a new perspective. My new apartment looks like home now, with my attempts at pottery and images of my chosen family, friends who value my independence and respect boundaries, adorning the walls. I've begun training my less experienced coworkers at work, breaking the vicious cycle of poisonous support that had long entrapped me. My relationship with time has altered the most. I can spend my weekends as I want. I've started learning Spanish, joined a local hiking group, and even began dating someone who respects and loves my boundaries. For the first time, I'm living a life that reflects who I am rather than what my family expects of me. Last Sunday, the twins sent me a handwritten card that was clearly prepared under supervision. It was packed with terrible remarks about how much they miss their aunt. Previously, this would have sent me into a dark spiral of uncertainty and remorse. Instead, I reacted with a loving yet forceful letter, expressing that while I may not be as active in their daily lives, my love for them has not changed, and that sometimes adults need to look for themselves. My therapist says I'm experiencing post-traumatic growth, which means that instead of simply moving on from the past, I'm developing something more strong and wholesome in its place. She's helped me realize that I'm not to blame for my family's dysfunction. The most recent development occurred yesterday, when Kate's husband Jack phoned me to inform me that my attitude has resulted in changes in their family, not to lay blame on me. They have finally hired part-time help to help with the twins, and he has been a more involved dad. Jack believes it is best for everyone, but Kate is having difficulty adjusting. As I write this final update, I'm sitting in my home office, preparing for a business trip next week, something I could never have done in my prior life. Behind my desk, there's a framed quote that relates to my journey. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is set yourself free. I'd like to thank everyone who backed me and followed my story. You gave me the confidence to make my own decisions. If you're wondering if people in similar situations are selfish for wanting their own lives, remember that you're not. Being free is not selfish. Treating oneself is not mean. And establishing boundaries is not a sign of treachery. I have no idea how my relationship with my family will evolve in the future. Perhaps one day we will discover a different form of connection, one founded on mutual respect rather than duty. In the meanwhile, I'm focusing on maintaining the life I've created, including my friendships, interests, profession, and, most importantly, my sense of myself. This is not the end. It is only the beginning. For the first time in my life, I'm excited to see what happens next. My parents turned my celebration into my sister's engagement party. I cut them off. Years later, I became CEO, and they came crawling back. They used my money to throw a party, then announced my sister's engagement instead of my promotion. What did I say next? It shattered the room. My name is Nancy Allen. I was born and raised in a tranquil suburb of Oregon. From the outside, my family appeared to be the ideal of middle-class American life. A house with a lavender-filled front yard, a spotless white picket fence, and pleasant family dinners under soft lighting. However, the inside was far from as nice as it appeared. My parents, Mark and Linda Allen, were firm believers in modern parenting techniques, and I was their firstborn. My father, a software engineer with a passion for math, had always wanted to have a bright, special child. My mother told her friends that she had read more than 40 books on child psychology before I was born. I was born into this world with tremendous expectations, monitored, measured, and experimented on like a test subject. But when I turned 3 and still couldn't count to 20, or write my name correctly, Mom's dismay was obvious. "Mark, I don't think she's capable of learning as quickly as we hoped," she said, her voice tinged with disappointment and trepidation. "We need to intervene early so we don't miss the golden stage." My father simply nodded slightly, but I recall how he looked at me that day, as if I were a math problem with the wrong answer, unworthy of further investigation. My younger sister Claire was born when I was 4 years old, and everything changed at home. Mom appeared to be another person. Every room in the house was packed with brain-boosting toys, emotion flashcards and advanced learning tools often found in high educational institutions. I had clear memories of that afternoon. I was quietly building Lego blocks in the corner of the living room when Mom passed by, looked at me and said, "Claire is only 7 months old and already responding to 3-step sequences. You never mind, keep playing." Claire received a musical high chair, Swedish cloth books, and a private monitor teacher before she turned 2. And me? I had pre-printed workbooks, a stubby pencil, and daily reminders that I needed to work harder to achieve. When I was 8, I finished second in the school-wide art competition. I brought my painting home, filled with excitement. Mom looked at it and said, "Huh. Well, Claire read an entire short story in English today." Dad didn't say anything because he was busy putting together a logic problem board for Claire downstairs. I've learned not to anticipate anything. No compliments, no incentives, and no proud expressions. I gradually became a shadow in my own family. Ever present but never really seen. The breaking point came in the fall of the year I turned 12. I'd always had my own room, the upstairs one with the window facing the small woodland back our house, where morning light filtered through the drapes in gentle rays. I adored that room. It was the one place where I felt entirely myself. Claire barged in one evening, just as I was finishing up my schooling and about to hang a new drawing on the wall. "Mom says I'm moving up here. This room's bigger, and I need space for my new study corner." I looked at her and thought it was a joke. "No," I responded firmly. "This is my room." Claire shrugged and walked away. Everything had changed in less than 24 hours when I returned home from school. My possessions had been relocated to the smaller room near the laundry area. Claire's name now adorned the old room, which was outfitted with modern learning tools and a clean white study desk. I walked into the new room, which was small, cramped, and cold. The bed reclined against the wall. The desk was too small to hold my books and a lamp. I stood there with my hands clenched, sobbing silently. "Mom," I called. "Why would you do this? That was my room. I've had it since I was little." She didn't even turn around. "You're older now. You should learn to give way. Claire needs it more. Don't make a scene, Nancy." I did not respond. I stepped back in, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. The light from the hallway filtered through the gap under the door, pale and odd. For the first time, I felt it clearly. Despite being the firstborn, I was regarded as an afterthought in that household. Claire remained the focal point of the Allen household by the time I was in my senior year of high school. She was now a top student at a prominent private high school, driven around in a brand new SUV and receiving private tutoring twice a week. And me? I still attended public school, walked to class every morning, and handled everything on my own, from academics to extracurricular activities. I've never complained. I'd become accustomed to being in the background. But I wasn't expecting the moment when every pretense of impartiality was shattered right at the dinner table. My grandparents, Arthur and Helen, paid us a visit that night. They were the only ones in the family who made me feel seen and heard. We were eating Mom's lasagna as Claire discussed her summer program plans at Stanford. "That's wonderful," Grandma Helen replied, turning to me. "And what about you, Nancy? Have you thought about college yet?" I looked up for the first time, hoping to contribute something of my own. "I applied to the University of Oregon and UC Davis. I just got accepted into Oregon's business program, partial scholarship. If I get more financial aid, then..." I hadn't even finished when Mom put down her fork and knife. The sound resonated strongly. "Nancy," she said, her voice straining, "your father and I have discussed it, and we are unable to provide additional tuition assistance this year." I blinked. Dad jumped in, as if rehearsed. "We need to prioritize Claire. She's been invited to an Ivy League prep program. It's a rare opportunity." My heart sank. "So all the college savings you said were for both of us are going to Claire?" Mom sighed, as if to state the obvious. "Claire has real potential. You, Nancy, might want to consider starting at community college and transferring. Or taking time to work. Isn't a bad option either." Not a bad option. It took me a second to realize they'd completely cut me off. The room went silent. No one spoke, save for the soft clink of Grandma Helen's spoon on her plate. "Linda," she said, her voice low but firm, "both girls are my granddaughters, And I can't sit here and watch one be cast aside. Mom pursed her lips. Mom, this isn't. Yes, it is, Grandpa Arthur added. It absolutely is our business. That night, as I was removing dishes from the kitchen, Grandma Helen approached and gently placed her hand on my shoulder. You don't have to carry this burden anymore, I heard her say. We'll pay for your college tuition. All of it, no loans needed. My eyes were crimson when I turned. But that's too much money. It's not too much when it's an investment in someone who tries. She smiled warmly. You don't need favoritism to shine, Nancy. You've already done it on your own. That fall I moved into the dorms at the University of Oregon. The day I left home, Mom gave me a half-hearted hug at the door and said, "Be frugal. And don't expect anything from us." Claire didn't look up from her phone. I stepped out of that house carrying my bag across the front yard path, feeling as if I had opened a new door, one free of patronizing stares and stinging comparisons. College was a different world. I wasn't the typical youngster. No longer the specter of a self-proclaimed genius. I was Nancy Allen, a business student with a bright mind and a strong personality. Professors praised my strategic thinking. Friends approached me for help with assignments. Every weekend night I called my grandparents to keep them up to date on my progress. My parents didn't call. They didn't check in either. Surprisingly, I was not unhappy. I didn't need it any longer. I had stopped looking for validation in a place where it was never readily available. What I had now was genuine value, one that came from within. I began my final year of college with a level of certainty that I had never imagined. Late-night library study sessions, part-time shifts at a small downtown cafe where I studied how customers think, and hours spent studying every investment model I could find online, helped me stand apart. Dr. Elgin, one of my finance instructors, suggested I apply for a competitive summer internship at Bradley & Lane Capital, a well-known investment firm in Seattle. I recall the first interview. A glass conference room, a beautiful wood table, and 3 managers seated across from me, each holding my resume. Zaylin, one of them, said, "What do you believe is the most important factor in developing an investment strategy?" I gave an answer. Understanding not just the data, but the psychology behind it. They exchanged glances and nods. I received the offer. From that summer forward, everything changed. After graduating with honors and having my study published in a financial magazine, I was offered a full-time position as a junior investment analyst at Bradley & Lane. I worked relentlessly, learning everything from risk studies and shareholder presentations to how to read between the lines on unpredictable market charts. 3 years later, when doing a standard assessment of a high-net-worth client portfolio, I discovered something concerning. A set of high-tech stocks in which our firm had made significant investments demonstrated signals of fake growth. The internal indications appeared to be especially robust when compared to the wider market. Most experts thought it had breakout potential. But I didn't. I spent 2 sleepless hours reading through every number, tracking back appendix reports, and eventually discovering the truth. Those businesses were inflating income through internal transactions, basically purchasing their own things to generate sales. If we did not withdraw in time, we would lose at least $32 million in customer assets. I couldn't be silent. That Monday morning, I entered the executive boardroom carrying a 42-page report and a risk simulation model. Nobody interrupted. When I finished, the CFO sat dumbfounded, then turned to the CEO and said, "She just saved the company." Within 3 days, the entire portfolio was reconstructed based on my proposal. And 6 months later, not only had we avoided a major loss, but the company recorded an 11.4% increase, the greatest in 7 years. I was promoted to lead investment strategist, but my journey didn't end there. I began using my after-hours time to create a risk score system based on market behavior, incorporating aspects such as consumer psychology, social media trends, and global political changes. It was the type of stuff the industry typically referred to as unquantifiable. I named it PRISM. Initially, PRISM was a personal project. However, after properly forecasting price fluctuations in 3 major stock groupings ahead of critical events, top management took notice. A year later, the method was fully integrated into the firm's fundamental strategy, allowing Bradley & Lane to outperform 2 of its main competitors in the sector. I still recall the day I was summoned to the senior boardroom. Richard Langley, the CEO, smiled at me once everyone had taken their seats. "Nancy," he responded. "We're creating an entirely new position, Chief Strategic Investment Officer, and no one is more deserving than you." I could barely breathe. Just 4 years ago, I was advised I should work for a time and figure things out later. That role was more than just a title. It was proof of everything I had conquered, from being the ignored child in my own home, to being the one at the helm of a multi-million-dollar company's boardroom. That evening, I did not celebrate with champagne or a party. I visited my grandparents' house, a simple red brick home filled with warmth. Grandma Helen was baking, and Grandpa Arthur was preparing tea. I placed the appointment letter on the table. They grinned at each other. "Little Nancy," Grandpa added, "now leading the way." I looked at him, then at Grandma, the first person who told me I didn't have to be extraordinary to be worthwhile. For the first time, I did not require anyone's approval. I had already proven it to myself by silent fortitude, dogged determination, and unshakable faith. After accepting the role as Chief Strategic Investment Officer at Bradley and Lane, I knew I needed to document the event. Not with grandeur, but with a small, loving gathering of individuals who had supported me. My grandparents, a few close friends, and a couple of trustworthy co-workers. When I relayed the idea to my mother, she promptly suggested, "You should let us host it. Do it at home. Make it more intimate. The family can also reunite." I paused, but she added, "You only need to send the money for catering and decorations. I'll handle the guest list and everything else." I was skeptical, but I believed after all these years, this would be our chance to start anew. I transferred $3,500 to her account, and did not inquire further. A week later, when I arrived at the old house in Salem, where I'd grown up steadily sliding behind Claire's shadow, I never expected to walk into a brilliantly organized production. The mansion was more richly furnished than I had imagined. White orchids decorated the dining tables, silky golden ribbons wound up the staircase, and the aroma of great meals pervaded the environment. I noticed my grandparents at the small pub, speaking with a few family members. Claire climbed the steps in a gorgeous crimson satin gown, her face flawlessly made up. I didn't recognize the tall, polished man who was walking beside her. People gathered around, and just as I raised my glass to speak, my mother stood up, smiling. "Dear family," she said to you, "we're here today not just to reconnect, but to celebrate something truly special. Claire and her boyfriend Andrew are officially engaged." Cheers and applause erupted. I stood frozen. I turned to my mother. Her glance swept over me as if I were only another paid guest at a banquet. As I stepped forward to speak, my father grasped my wrist like a period at the end of a sentence. "Don't ruin this," he urged, his voice as sharp as steel. "If you make a scene now, don't expect anything else from this family. No contact, no inheritance, nothing." I released his hand from mine, and took a deep breath. Part of me wanted to get away and let them drown in their own play, but the other side, which had spent too long in the shadows, refused to remain silent. I returned to the center of the room, raised my champagne glass and said, "Excuse me, everyone. May I have just a moment?" All eyes were on me, and Claire paused mid-step. My mother's brow furrowed. "This gathering today," I continued softly but plainly, "was planned to celebrate a major milestone in my life. I was recently named Chief Strategic Investment Officer at Bradley and Lane, a major financial firm in Seattle." I paused and searched the room. "I'm the one who sent the money for this event. My mother agreed to organize it and never once mentioned it would be turned into an engagement party." Murmurs echoed across the room. My grandparents remained frozen, astounded. "I'm not against Claire's engagement," I told her. "What I can't stay silent about is the fact that my own family tried to erase me from my own moment. Just like they did all throughout my childhood." Andrew looked at Claire, perplexed. "You told me this was just a family gathering." Claire's face turned red. "Andrew, I just wanted to wait for the right time." "By using your sister's money to stage your big reveal?" he asked, his voice dropping. "I came here expecting to feel welcomed, not to watch someone be pushed out of their own moment." He put down his glass and walked away. Claire chased him in vain. The room plunged into uncomfortable silence. My father stood there, outraged. "You should know your place, Nancy. This is still—" "No," I interrupted. This is a place built on favoritism. It's not a home anymore. I turned to my grandparents. They hadn't moved. Grandma Helen's eyes sparkled, and Grandpa Arthur took my hand as I approached them. I don't need the rest of this family to know who I am. I walked out the same door I'd previously left silently. But this time, I held my head high. Andrew left the party without saying anything, leaving behind Claire's terrified visage and a perplexed family. She chased him to the porch, but the car door shut before she could speak. The Mercedes' tail lights faded behind the trees, leaving the room silent after it had previously been full with laughter. Claire returned, her tears quickly replaced by wrath. You've always been jealous of me. You can't stand seeing me happy, so you destroy everything. I stood still. I did not reply. For the first time, I wasn't hurt. I was just sick of hearing the same boring blame repeated like a broken record. Claire, Grandma Helen said, her voice calm but firm. You made your own choices. Don't blame the consequences on your sister. My mother raced forward, her face blanched with rage and embarrassment. Nancy, who do you think you are to humiliate your sister in front of our family? I don't need to think, I said quietly. I just told the truth. And I've stayed quiet long enough. My father grabbed my mother's hand and tried to hold her back, but his eyes were blazing. If you walk out of here today, he said in a cold tone, you're no longer part of this family. Don't expect an inheritance. Don't expect to ever call us again. As far as we're concerned, you never existed. I was about to speak when Grandpa Arthur, who had been silent the entire evening, stepped forward, his voice ringing out like a bronze bell in the quiet room. David, if you're going to cut Nancy out of this family, then it's time we clarify a few things. Grandma Helen walked beside him, holding his hand. My mother looked at them, as if she knew what was coming. We updated our will 3 months ago, she replied gently. The entire estate, the house, the savings, the investment shares, it's all going to Nancy. My mother let out a surprising gasp. What? We've seen enough, Grandpa Arthur said. Enough to know who lives by their values, and who lives off of being coddled. Claire is my biological daughter, my mother nearly yelled. Why her? Because she's the only one in this family who has never demanded anything, complained, or stepped on others to elevate herself, Grandma Helen explained, her voice trembling slightly, but her gaze steady. We don't reward favoritism or deceit. Claire burst into tears as her pride disintegrated. She ran up the stairs, her red dress bursting like a bleeding stroke on a collapsing canvas. My mother stood in the middle of the room, lips trembling. My father turned away silently. My pulse pounded as I grasped my purse and gazed at my grandparents. I never asked for this. I don't need the inheritance. We know, Grandpa Arthur said, smiling. And that's exactly why you deserve it more than anyone. I looked around the house, which had once been a wound, but is now a stage for the truth to be shown. The family rose from their seats one by one, averting my gaze as if they had just woken up from a bad dream. Nobody stopped me when I turned to leave. I went outside, the spring night breeze stroking my cheeks and carrying the familiar scent of apple blossoms from the backyard. I heard the door close behind me, but this time it did not crash shut. It was the culmination of years of endurance. On the walk back to my grandparents' house, Grandma Helen reached out and lovingly grasped my hand. You don't have to fight to prove yourself anymore, Nancy, she once said to me. Now you get to just be. I looked at her with stinging eyes. I'd never felt so calm. Not because of money. This is not due to recognition. However, for the first time I chose myself over gaining acceptance from those who never truly wanted to see me. 3 years have passed since that night, when I walked out of my parents' house for the last time, carrying the truth, agony, and power I had no idea I possessed. I never looked back. I've never felt the impulse to. Throughout those 3 years, I gave my everything to my work at Bradley and Lane. Every early morning before dawn, every tranquil night on the 19th floor, I was there. Fine-tuning strategy, updating the Prism algorithm, listening to the market, and leading my team beyond previously insurmountable obstacles. When Richard Langley, the existing CEO, announced his retirement, no one expected him to choose me as his replacement. But for me, it was not luck. It was the conclusion of every effort, sleepless night, and difficult decision I had ever faced. I was 30 years old when I was officially appointed CEO of Bradley and Lane Capital, making me the company's youngest female CEO in its 60-plus year history. The announcement happened in the main hall. Camera lights are flashing. Every seat was filled with shareholders. I came on stage not to wow, but to represent a new generation, one that does not have to be born into grandeur to make its mark. After the lecture, I took out my phone and called my grandparents. "I did it!" I exclaimed, my voice full of enthusiasm. Grandpa Arthur laughed on the other end, and Grandma Helen spoke words that I will never forget. "You've always been worthy, Nancy. From day one." Meanwhile, 40 miles away in Salem, where I grew up, not much had changed. Claire was now 27. She no longer wore her engagement ring or had steady employment. Andrew left that night, and her life became a series of failed attempts. She dropped a fashion course because she felt under too much pressure. I attempted being a content creator but quit, because no one gets my style. I eventually moved back in with our parents, into the room she had taken from me. I haven't interacted with my parents since that night. My grandparents occasionally mention that they have inquired about me through shared relationships, but I don't care any longer. I've realized that not every relationship is meant to last, especially when it is founded on denial and selfishness. Every Sunday afternoon I visit my grandparents for dinner. We toast bread and pore through old photo albums that I assumed were lost forever. Grandma Helen still tells me modest anecdotes about my upbringing. Grandpa Arthur swears he doesn't remember them, so I have to repeat every detail. I once asked them whether they had any regrets about leaving everything to me. "We didn't leave because of what it was worth," Grandma stated. "We left it to the one who understood the value of choice, the one who chose integrity over convenience, silence when it mattered, and voice when it counted." I smiled because I recognized that the most valuable inheritance they had given me was faith, not assets. One spring afternoon, as I was leaving the office after a global strategy meeting, I observed someone waiting in the main lobby. I squinted and saw it was Claire. She appeared smaller, with an anxious expression, but she maintained her signature look, a luxury coat and polished heels. "I'm not here to apologize," Claire said hastily, like a barrier. I just want to know how you're doing so well without anyone lifting you up." I looked at her, neither angry nor pitying. "Because I once had nothing, Claire. And that's when I learned to stand on my own. That's something you've never had to do." Claire looked at me for a long time. She said nothing and began to walk away. I'm not convinced she'll ever change. But I know I will never be the sister who always gave in, endured, and remained silent to keep the peace. I strolled back to my workplace where my team was ready to cooperate and build something fresh. And I realized that no matter where the path leads, as long as you don't abandon yourself, the journey will always be worthwhile. My story is more than just about how I overcame parental bias. It displays the power of perseverance and inner worth. I was once ignored, pushed aside at my own celebration. But I chose to ascend out of honesty and respect, rather than anger. Today, I no longer seek affirmation from those who previously rejected me, because I have found a community of people who believe in me. Most importantly, I learned to believe in myself. What are your thoughts on Nancy's decision? Was she overly harsh, or was it exactly what she deserved given what she had gone through? Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Family laughed at my business over dinner. I let them talk. Then I built an empire. When I shut the door, they begged me to come back. My whole family laughed at me at dinner. So I invited them all back, to my mansion. What I told them at the end left the room in total silence. During Thanksgiving dinner, my family made fun of my small business. How's that going? Still broke yet? They let out a big laugh. I said nothing. They discovered that I was yesterday. Even now, occasionally, I can still hear the laughter in my ears. There was more than simply laughter. It seemed nasty, piercing, and sharp, the kind that permeates a space. Last Thanksgiving, that is. With a turkey in the middle, candles flickering softly, and the sound of football resonating from the living room, the table was crowded. It ought to have been comfortable, it ought to have been familiar. Rather, it was like being in a harsh, chilly spotlight. When my cousin Jenna snorted so loudly that she nearly knocked over her wine glass, I was halfway through telling Uncle Brian about my business, which I put every hour, every cent, and every part of myself into. She snarled, adding further venom to the phrase as if it were a sickness. "How's your little business going? Still broke yet?" another person asked. I didn't even look to see who it was. It was followed by thunderous laughter. My dad muttered a little laugh. In that pitying, disappointing manner, my mother shook her head. I said nothing. I gave them a tiny, fragile smile and let them enjoy themselves. But something changed inside. The goal was not to disprove them. I wanted to prove myself correct. For them, I was not going to succeed. In spite of them, I was going to succeed. I recall trying to ignore the knot in my gut as I stood in the kitchen after supper, scraping leftovers into a plastic container. From the living room came the sounds of football and laughter. My brother James was making a lot of noise about how I probably sold 3 t-shirts in a year. When he said, maybe next year he'll afford real mashed potatoes, everyone laughed so hard that someone gave up. I lowered my head. However, an odd event occurred. I assume no one could hear my father, my aunt, and a few other people conversing in the den through the partially closed door as I went to put the dishes away. I heard it at that point. Aunt Linda murmured, "Poor kid," with a tone of phony worry. "Still chasing rainbows?" Dad gave a grunt. If he had any sense, he'd quit that fantasy and get a real job. Wendy's is always hiring. They all laughed. By the time he's 30, he'll still be living in some drab apartment dreaming about his big break. "It's almost sad," said another voice, possibly that of my uncle. The words that hurt the most were then spoken by my mother, who is a kind and loving person. "Well, at least he's harmless. I mean, it's not like he'll ever actually succeed enough to embarrass us." With my hands shaking around a plate I hadn't even known I was holding, I remained motionless. They weren't merely skeptical of me. They thought I would fail. They needed me to fail, which is worse. They would be safer if I remained the underdog, the idealist who never achieved anything. I ventured to think I could create something better, but it was simpler than acknowledging they had chosen a life of mediocrity and resentment. Without saying goodbye, I took my jacket from the peg by the door, put the dish carefully in the sink, and left the kitchen. I hardly noticed the cold air biting my face outside. I had just one idea racing through my head. Never again. I would never again ask for their blessing. I would never again justify myself to those who were hoping for my downfall. I opened my laptop that evening and spent a considerable amount of time staring at the screen while I sat by myself in my small, drafty flat. I could either fall under their incredulity or use it to shape me into something unstoppable. I went into my business plan, made all the necessary changes, tightened it up, and plotted out every crazy, unachievable goal I could think of. After that, I started working. And I continued. After Thanksgiving, the first 6 months were terrible. I worked out of a small 1-bedroom apartment with plumbing that shook like a dying engine and barely functional heat. My hands were cramped from typing, packing, and hustle, and my eyes burned from too many hours of staring at a screen. I usually woke up before daylight and fell asleep after midnight. I didn't have an impressive startup tale. Angel investors weren't present. No loans from relatives. Just me, a used printer, a laptop that was half broken, and a heart full of obstinate blazing defiance. There were mornings when I would sit at the small kitchen table, surrounded by empty coffee cups and bills, and wonder what on earth I was doing. I would distrust myself more than I would be insulted by my family. Maybe they were right. Maybe you are just chasing rainbows. Maybe you are just nothing. Then I would hear my mom's voice again. At least he's harmless. I mean, it's not like he'll ever actually succeed enough to embarrass us. And that would rekindle the fire beneath me. In the least spectacular way imaginable, the pivotal moment occurred. A random online order I packed one night while dozing off, a customer I had all but forgotten about, and a social media tag for my little business. A picture, a post, and a few complimentary remarks regarding the caliber of my work. There was nothing viral about it. Not a million likes. No quick stardom. However, when I woke up the following day, I had 12 new orders, which is more than I typically receive in a week. 24 then. Then 60. I had to hurry, get more supplies, work more quickly, and update my website. However, the impetus was genuine and palpable for the first time. It also brought new people. Actual persons. Not relatives. Not doubters. Individuals who supported my ideas, believed in what I was creating, and wrote notes that said, "You're doing something special. Keep going." It's done me, honestly. How strangers could be kinder than everyone in my family. And among all of the orders, shipments, late nights, and unrelenting labor, I came to the following realization. Blood is not family. Family is loyalty. Respect is family. Family is unconditional affection that isn't conditioned or judged. Brick by heavy brick, piece by piece, the weight I'd carried my entire life, the urgent desire for their approval, began to crumble. And I could see the path ahead clearly for the first time. It would take a long time. It would be solitary. However, I was going to have it. It took place on a soggy Tuesday. Life-altering events seldom wait for ideal weather, which is funny. I received an email as I was bent over a pile of packaging orders at my kitchen table. Initially, I nearly erased it. Opportunity, the subject line, sounded like just another spam message. However, I opened it for some reason. It came from Caroline Walters, a boutique owner who I had never heard of but who seemed to have a sizable fan base in the independent sector. She wanted to discuss a cooperation after discovering one of my goods through that small customer post months ago. A large one. Supplying her nationwide chain of businesses. I read her words repeatedly as if they were written in a different language while I sat there blinking at the computer. She thought the branding was fantastic. She thought the quality was fantastic. She thought the story was fantastic. Additionally, if I could quickly scale up, she wanted to highlight my whole product line. I didn't think twice. I responded in 5 minutes, possibly coming out as impatient yet unconcerned. Later that afternoon, she called me, and her voice was enthusiastic, professional, and kind. She inquired about the size of my procedure. I told the truth. For now, I informed her, it was just me. She chuckled. My family's chuckle is one of happiness and admiration rather than one of derision. Her words, that's even better. People love authenticity. I had a draft contract in my inbox by the time the call ended. I had contacted a small fulfillment company before the end of the week to assist me with production management. My business, which they ridiculed, was closing a deal by the end of the month that would put 6 figures in my pocket before spring. It seemed unreal. I realized my life was changing as I stood in that same small kitchen, the cheap linoleum floor sticky under my bare feet, the rain beating down on the window. I ought to have been overjoyed. However, all I experienced was this peculiar, silent calm. The air wasn't punched by me. I refrained from screaming into the night. I simply grinned slowly and wearily and muttered to the empty room, "You were wrong about me." They were wrong. Every single one of them. The following year flew by, filled with new contracts, restless nights, and hard-won development. I was no longer merely getting by. I was doing well. The small company they made fun of grew into a real one with staff, investors, and actual momentum. I just sat there and gazed at the screen for a long time the first time I wired 6 digits into my savings account. Not because I found it hard to believe. No, I anticipated this. Because I secretly knew that I didn't feel the way I had anticipated. I felt no vindication. I didn't feel victorious. I simply felt liberated. That's when I had the notion. I had no desire for vengeance. I desired resolution. I had no intention of showing up at their home with a bank statement in front of them. Number it would be too simple. It's too loud. I looked too much like the child they believed me to be. I chose to let them come to me instead. First, I purchased a huge house. I mean, a mansion. Situated on a hill, the expansive windows captured each sunset. Marble floors that reverberated as you moved. And enough space to lose yourself in. I told myself this each time I passed across those enormous, deserted hallways. You built this. No one can take it away. My cousins used to make jokes about my never being able to afford anything more than a second-hand Honda, so I filled the garage with that kind of vehicle. A Maserati in deep black. A Jeep that has been customized. A vintage Mustang, simply because I could. I didn't make any online posts about it. Avoid taking selfies in front of fast autos. No toasts with champagne. I said nothing. Then I sent out a group text 2 months ago. Easy. Straightforward. Family gathering. Sunday. Big news to share. The invitation was accepted by everyone. Naturally, they didn't. Deep down, they still considered me to be the loser they could comfortably feel sorry for, despite the fact that curiosity is a strong narcotic. They had no idea that their jaws would drop to the ground before they had even rung the doorbell when they pulled up that twisting road. They were unaware that they were not the subject of the major news. It was all about me and the new life I had created in their absence. On the day of the event, the air was clear and the sky was so clear that it appeared to have been painted. Even though I got up early, I wasn't at all anxious. I walked about the home in silence during the morning, straightening a painting here, adjusting a vase there. Little pointless activities to kill time. The Maserati shone in the driveway like a black mirror in the sunlight. Beside it, the Jeep and Mustang stood with pride. By midday, my hired caterers were preparing a lavish buffet in the garden, complete with silver cutlery, white tablecloths, and buckets of chilled champagne. I didn't do anything. I just waited. The first vehicle arrived at precisely 1 o'clock. Jenna, my cousin, was there. I saw the mansion as soon as she got out of her dirty minivan while sporting her go-to fake fancy sunglasses. The hesitancy. She gave her husband a brief, piercing look as though to inquire, "Are we at the right place?" A second vehicle pulled up. Then another, and yet another. Their expressions were a mixture of bewilderment and incredulity as they spilled out into the driveway one by one. I couldn't hear Uncle Brian muttering something. In an attempt to appear disinterested, my brother James hummed softly to himself. My mother, who always wore a look of bored superiority at family gatherings, was motionless on the front steps, holding her purse tightly like a shield. For a long, beautiful moment, no one spoke. Then Jenna burst out laughing, too loud and brittle. She exclaimed, "Oh wow," as she adjusted her shades. "You, renting this place or something?" I gave a charming smile. "Not renting, bought it last month." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "You're kidding," another person remarked, half laughing, half panicking. They had never been unsteady before. They weren't accustomed to me being in control. The marble floors shone like water beneath the chandeliers, and I pointed to the open doors. "Come in. Make yourselves comfortable." Like visitors to a large museum, they cautiously made their way inside, avoiding contact with anything. As they moved through the spacious living room, the open kitchen, and the glass walls that looked out onto the well-kept backyard, I observed them from behind. They were rushing to change their stories, and I could see it in their expressions. The desperate search for an explanation that would allow them to maintain their sense of superiority. Their faces were plastered with fake smiles. "Wow," exclaimed my aunt. "This is, really nice. Good for you." Uncle Brian added, "Yeah," giving me a too firm pat on the back. "We always knew you had potential." I simply nodded. Let them speak. Allow them to tangle into knots. I no longer required their approval, never again. I wasn't here to make an impression. I came to bid you farewell. The catering staff presented small works of art, known as hors d'oeuvres, on silver trays. Bites of smoked salmon. Little Wellingtons made with beef. Tiny tartlets that appeared too good to devour. My family walked around seeming like they were at ease. A bit too loudly laughing. Praising the furnishings, the vista, and the tasteful design. It was simple to see beneath the surface though, as their eyes darted around, attempting to solve the problem they were unable to solve. How? When? Did you win the lottery? Was his claim of struggle a lie? They desperately wanted this to be untrue because if it were, it would mean that all of their assumptions about me and themselves were incorrect. Always the most audacious, James drew me away from the champagne table. "So seriously," he replied with a grin. "How do you swing all this? Who's paying you, or is it some kind of like crypto thing?" I gave a faint smile. "I built it," was all I said. He blinked. "Built what?" "My company. My brand. Everything." He gazed at me as if I were speaking a foreign tongue. "Constructed, not talented, not bumped into, constructed." James laughed, this weak trembling thing that didn't quite reach his eyes, and stroked my shoulder like if I were a child. "Man, that's wild. Good for you. Really proud of you, bro." He wasn't, not for a moment. My mother looked at me from the opposite side of the room. She smiled at me, the tense, strained smile she used to wear to church when she pretended everything was just right. I gave a courteous nod. Today there would be no yelling. Don't argue, no charges. Just a single, tidy cut. I looked at my watch. It's almost time. I strolled to the middle of the room, where the marble floors were bathed in golden light from the chandeliers, and I raised a glass, not for a celebratory toast but for closure. The room instantly fell silent. Every discussion ended in the middle of a phrase. All of them looked at me expectantly and eagerly. I finally got their undivided attention after all this time. I let the silence to linger a bit too long while I held the glass loosely in my palm. I felt the pressure of their gazes on me, but I wasn't bothered by it for once. I was in charge of the room for once. I casually cleared my throat. I said, first of all, in a cool, collected tone, "Thank you all for coming." A couple of courteous nods. Uncomfortable foot shuffles. "I'm sure you're wondering why I invited you here today," I said. "And the truth is, it's not to brag. It's not to show off." With a gentle clink that sounded almost like a bell toll, I placed my glass down on an adjacent table. I brought you here because I owe you something. They became alert, feeling something. Perhaps they believed that I was going to give them a share of the pie. Perhaps they believed that I was going to tell those who had always supported me about my accomplishment. I allowed that dream to linger for a single, cruel heartbeat. Then I gave a chilly, final smile. When I said, I owe you a thank you. Because without you, none of this would exist. Whispers? Smiles of confusion. My voice was as steady as ice as I continued. I appreciate all of the insults you have ever directed at me while you assumed I wasn't paying attention. I appreciate you making fun of my dreams. I appreciate you placing bets against me, having doubts about me, and demonstrating unequivocally that your definition of family was limited to your personal comfort. James stirred uneasily. No one dared to interrupt Jenna as she appeared to be about to say something. I leaned in a little and took a breath. You taught me something valuable. You taught me that real family isn't blood, it's loyalty. It's respect. It's standing beside someone when there's nothing to gain. A rhythm. And because of that lesson, today is not just a celebration of what I built, it's a farewell. They were slapped across the face by the words. I'm cutting ties, I remarked in a low voice. After today, I will no longer be part of this family. Quiet. Complete and utter quiet. Then the roar burst forth like a dam bursting. But we're family, exclaimed Aunt Linda. Jenna stumbled. You can't be serious. James moved forward with a somewhat terrified expression. Hey man, come on. Don't be dramatic. Even my normally calm mother appeared to have taken a hit to the gut. She opened and closed her mouth, but no sound emerged. I simply grinned, genuinely this time. Free. When I said, I wish you the best. And I hope someday you realize what you lost. I turned after that. I then turned to go. I didn't turn around. I could hear the frantic cries behind me, the begging voices becoming softer with each stride. Wait, please, don't do this. We didn't mean it. You're making a mistake. I continued to walk. Beyond the marble flooring, beyond the chandeliers that gleam, past everything that meant nothing at all and once harmed me. I arrived at the front door. Stopped. Then I shut it behind me without thinking twice. Like the last ending of a chapter, the hefty thud reverberated throughout the house, not only of that particular day but also of my previous existence. The environment outside felt different as the door snapped shut behind me. My face was stroked by the cool breeze. The driveway was bathed in a gentle golden glow as the sun began to set. There was silence. Calm. For a moment, I just stood there and took it in. Not a sound. Not guilty. Don't second-guess yourself. My former existence was behind those walls. The days of begging for bits of affection and pursuing praise were finally, totally ended. And while I stood there beneath the open sky, I came to the following realization: the quiet wasn't meaningless. It was liberty. There was nothing that I owed them. No justifications. I'm not sorry. No pardon. They had already made their decisions. Finally, I had done the same. I wasn't escaping them for the first time in my life. I had no intention of proving anything. I just kept on going, without them. Months have passed since that day. And what do you know? I've never regretted it. The phone calls. The written word. After a while, they ceased. Initially, the messages were hostile. Then guilt trips. Then frantic excuses. None of them were answered by me,